My name is Leela Carter. I'm 28 years old, a freelance illustrator, and the invisible one in my family. If you've ever been overlooked, pushed aside while someone else took all the praise, then you already know how it feels to be me. The night it all changed started like any other family event, my sister Julia's promotion party. The room was filled with expensive champagne, polished laughter, and the kind of people who only noticed me when they needed someone to hold their coat. Julia, radiant in her designer dress, stood at the center of it all, glowing under the admiration of our parents, her colleagues, and the world that had always loved her more. I stood near the dessert table, sipping my drink, trying to make myself small. It was a skill I'd perfected over the years, folding into the background, smiling when expected, never making a scene. But that night, Julia decided I hadn't been humiliated enough. She took the microphone, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she thanked everyone for coming. And then, with a smirk that made my stomach twist, she said, asterisk, of course. I wouldn't be here without my family's support. Well, except Lila. Asterisk, a ripple of laughter. Asterisk, what exactly do you contribute? Anyway, your little drawings. Mom and Dad still pay your bills. Asterisk, the room laughed. My face burned. I wanted to disappear. But then silence. Julia's boss, a man with sharp eyes and an unreadable expression, stepped forward. The crowd parted for him like he was royalty. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The room stilled just from the weight of his presence. Julia, he said, and the way he said her name made her flinch. Asterisk, sit down. She did. Then he turned to me, Lila Carter. Asterisk, he said, and for the first time in my life, someone important was looking at me, really looking. Asterisk, you're the artist behind Whispers of the Heart, aren't you? Asterisk, my breath caught. How did he know that? The room erupted in murmurs. Julia's face went pale. My parents, standing near the front, exchanged glances, guilty, shocked, and in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They had known, they had always known, and they had chosen to keep it from me. The room seemed to shrink around me as Mr. Harrison's words hung in the air. Whispers of the Heart was my passion project, a series of illustrations I'd poured my soul into over countless sleepless nights. I'd posted them online under a pseudonym, never dreaming anyone important would see them, let alone recognize me as the creator. My hands trembled around my champagne flute as I tried to process what was happening. Julia's face had gone from smug superiority to something resembling panic. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into the stem of her glass as she stared between me and her boss. I didn't realize you followed amateur art, she said with forced lightness. But her voice cracked on the last word. Mr. Harrison didn't even glance her way. His attention remained fixed on me, his expression unreadable. Amateur, he repeated, and the single word carried enough weight to make several guests shift uncomfortably. Your sister's work has been featured in 3 major galleries this year. The New York Times called her the most poignant new voice in contemporary illustration. The floor might as well have dropped out from under me. My lungs refused to work properly. I'd known my online following had grown, but galleries? The Times? How is this possible without me knowing? My eyes darted to my parents, who stood frozen near the head table. My mother's hand fluttered too, her throat in that nervous gesture I knew so well. A sickening realization began to take shape. They knew. They had to know. Mr. Harrison continued, his voice carrying easily in the now silent room. When I saw the signature on your work, that little crescent moon you always hide in the corner, I knew immediately it was you. Your sister had shown me family photos where you'd doodled the same symbol in the margins. He turned to Julia then, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Though she failed to mention your considerable talent when I asked about the artist. Julia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The confident, razor-tongued lawyer had been reduced to stunned silence. I'd never seen her at a loss for words before. And part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, relished the moment. Then Mr. Harrison said the words that would change everything. I'd like to commission you for our firm's anniversary campaign. Your style would be perfect for what we have in mind. The gasps around the room were audible. Julia's promotion had been for landing a major client, the same client now offering me a career-making opportunity. The irony tasted bitter on my tongue, as the party dissolved into awkward murmurs and sidelong glances. I noticed my father pulling Mr. Harrison aside. Even from across the room, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept his voice, low but urgent. My mother appeared at my elbow, her perfume suddenly overwhelming. Leela, darling, she said, her smile strained at the edges. Perhaps we should discuss this at home. This isn't really the place. That's when I saw it, the fear in her eyes. Not fear for me, but fear of what this might mean. The careful family dynamic they'd maintained for years was unraveling before their eyes, and they were scrambling to contain the damage. I opened my mouth to respond, but a hand touched my arm. Mr. Harrison had returned, my father trailing behind him, looking uncharacteristically flustered. I've taken the liberty of having my assistant pull some of your work, Mr. Harrison said, handing me a tablet. There on the screen was my entire portfolio pieces I'd posted under my pseudonym, along with professional photographs of my artwork displayed in galleries I'd never stepped foot in. My breath caught at the sight. Someone had been representing my work, selling it, profiting from it. And judging by my parents' ashen faces, they knew exactly who. The room started to spin. The champagne in my stomach turned to acid. All those times my parents had brushed off my art as a cute hobby. All those times Julia had mocked my childish drawings, while behind my back, ... I think I need some air, I managed to say before pushing through the crowd, ignoring my mother's calls. The last thing I saw before the terrace doors closed behind me was Julia cornering Mr. Harrison, her face a mask of desperate charm that was already failing. The cold night air hit my face like a slap. I gripped the stone railing until my knuckles turned white, trying to steady my breathing. Below me, the city lights blurred through unshed tears. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my own worth, had been appended in a matter of minutes. A sound behind me made me turn. My father stood in the doorway, his usually impeccable suit rumpled. His expression, one I'd never seen before, something like shame. Lila, he began, then stopped. For a man who commanded courtrooms for a living, he seemed at a complete loss for words. That silence told me everything I needed to know. The betrayal cut deeper than any of Julia's public humiliations ever had. Because this wasn't just about overlooking me, this was active deception. I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand and squared my shoulders. How long? My voice came out steadier than I felt. How long have you known about the galleries? The way his gaze dropped to the ground answered before his words did. About 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of them knowing my art was being celebrated while they pretended it was nothing. 2 years of Julia's condescension. Of family dinners where they discussed her cases in detail before asking me, as an afterthought, if I'd found a real job yet. The terrace door opened again, and Mr. Harrison stepped out. My father looked almost relieved at the interruption. I've taken the liberty of canceling the rest of the evening's festivities. Mr. Harrison said, my driver is ready when you are. He held out a business card. I understand this is ... complicated, but the offer stands. Whenever you're ready. I took the card numbly. The weight of it in my hand felt like the first real thing in this surreal nightmare. My father found his voice then. Now wait just a minute. Leela isn't making any decisions tonight. She needs time too. I'm 28 years old, I interrupted, the words sharp as broken glass. I think I can decide for myself whether I need time. The look on his face, shock, then something almost like fear would have been satisfying if it didn't hurt so much. Mr. Harrison simply nodded. I'll be in touch. With a final glance between me and my father, he disappeared back inside, alone. Again with my father, the silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. The party noises inside had dimmed to an uneasy murmur. Somewhere beyond the doors, my perfect sister was watching her perfect evening crumble. And a small, dark part of me was glad. Your mother and I? My father began, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. We thought we were protecting you. Protecting me. The laugh that escaped me was raw and ugly. From what? Success? Recognition? From disappointment. The outburst surprised us both. He took a deep breath, lowering his voice. The art world is brutal, Leela. We saw how fragile you were after college, how many rejections you took to heart. When that first gallery reached out, we thought it would be better handled by professionals. It took me a moment to parse what he was saying. You, ... you didn't just know about the galleries, you're involved. His silence was confirmation enough. The pieces clicked together. With horrible clarity, the mysterious agent who had contacted me online about representing my work, the contracts I'd signed without fully understanding, the modest but steady deposits to my bank account that I'd assumed came from print sales. All this time, I'd thought I was building something on my own. And all this time, it had been another one of my family's carefully orchestrated performances. The nausea returned in waves. I pushed past my father, back into the party that had become a waking nightmare. Guests pretended not to stare as I made my way to the exit, but their whispers followed me like ghosts. Lila, wait. Julia's voice cut through the murmurs. I turned To see her hurrying after me, her perfect hair coming loose, her makeup smudged. For the first time in our lives, she was the one chasing after me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not when every memory, every interaction with my family over the past 2 years had just been cast in a new horrifying light. The elevator doors closed between us, cutting off her pleading expression. As the car descended, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea where to go next. The cold night air slapped my face as I stumbled out of the building, my breath coming in ragged gasps that fogged in the winter air. I hadn't grabbed my coat, but the numbness spreading through my body made the chill irrelevant. My heels clicked unevenly on the pavement as I walked without direction, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. A taxi slowed beside me, the driver taking in my evening gown and bare shoulders with concern. "Miss, you all right?" I opened my mouth to say yes, but what came out was a broken laugh that startled us both. Shaking my head, I kept walking. The cab drove off, leaving me alone with the echo of my father's confession ringing in my ears. 2 years. For 2 years. They'd known. My phone buzzed incessantly in my clutch, no doubt my mother's frantic texts. Julia's damage control, my father's carefully worded explanations. I didn't check. Instead, I found myself standing outside a tiny 24-hour diner I used to frequent during college. The neon open sign flickering like a beacon. The bell jingled as I pushed through the door, drawing curious looks from the late-night patrons. A waitress with tired eyes and a name tag reading Dolores took in my formal wear and streaked mascara without comment. "Coffee, hun?" I nodded, collapsing into a corner booth where the vinyl stuck slightly to my bare arms. When the coffee came thick and black and scalding, I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into my frozen fingers. The reality of what had happened began sinking in, layer by devastating layer. Not just the betrayal, but the logistics of it. My art, the deeply personal sketches I'd created during my loneliest nights. The illustrations that bled my insecurities and hopes onto the page had been circulating in galleries. Critics had analyzed them, strangers had purchased them, and my family had orchestrated it all without ever letting me see the fruits of my own labor. A fresh wave of nausea rolled through me as I remembered the deposits in my bank account. Had they been pity payments? A way to assuage their guilt while keeping me safely in the dark? I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, ignoring the dozens of notifications to pull up my banking app. The numbers stared back at me. Suddenly sinister, I'd thought I was finally standing on my own 2 feet, paying my own rent with money earned from my art. But it had all been another carefully constructed illusion. Yet another way for them to control the narrative. The bell over the door jingled. Again, I didn't look up until a familiar cologne cut through the diner, smells of grease and coffee. Mr. Harrison stood beside my table, his overcoat damp from the light snow that had begun falling. I wanted to say no. Wanted to scream at him to leave me alone in my humiliation. But the part of me that had spent a lifetime being polite, the good girl, the quiet sister, just nodded. He slid into the booth opposite me, signaling Dolores for another coffee. For a long moment, we sat in silence while the diner's ancient radiator hissed and clanked. Finally, he spoke. "I owe you an apology." That surprised me enough to meet his eyes. They were darker than I remembered, the lines around them more pronounced under the diner's harsh lighting. "I should have approached this differently," he continued. "Had I known the situation with your family, You couldn't have known." My voice sounded raw, like I'd been screaming, rather than sitting silently in a cab for 20 minutes. "I didn't even know." Dolores refilled my coffee, eyeing Mr. Harrison with suspicion. He waited until she was out of earshot before leaning forward slightly. "Your work is extraordinary, Leela. Not just technically skilled, but alive in a way I haven't seen in years." He paused. "That's why I need you for the Kensington project." I blinked. After everything that had happened tonight, he was still talking business. "Mr. Harrison, with all due respect, Daniel," he corrected, "and I understand if you need time, but the offer is genuine. This isn't about your sister or your family or whatever, complicated dynamics I walked into tonight." He reached into his coat pocket and produced a thumb drive. "All the project details are here. No pressure, no obligations." I stared at the small device like it might bite me. Taking it felt like accepting a lifeline from a stranger in dark waters. Dangerous, reckless. But what did I have to lose at this point? As my fingers closed around the thumb drive, my phone buzzed again. A preview of my mother's latest text flashed. Across the screen, "We need to talk about this as a family." The irony was almost funny. 28 years of being an afterthought, and now they couldn't wait to talk. Daniel's gaze flickered to my phone, then back to my face. I have a car outside. If you need somewhere to stay tonight. It was a dangerous offer from a man I barely knew. But the thought of going home, of facing my family's explanations and excuses, was infinitely more terrifying. I found myself nodding. The snow had picked up when we stepped outside, blanketing the city in eerie quiet. A black town car idled at the curb, exhaust curling into the cold air. As I slid into the warm leather seat, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. Smeared makeup, tangled hair, eyes wide with something between fear and exhilaration. The girl looking back at me was a stranger. And for the first time in my life, that didn't seem like such a bad thing. That as the car pulled away from the curb, my phone lit up with another call. Julia's name flashed across the screen. I turned the phone, face down on the seat, and watched the city blur past through snowflake glass, wondering who I might be by morning. The town car glided through snow-slick streets, the world outside reduced to smears of neon and streetlight through fogged windows. Daniel sat quietly beside me, the space between us filled with the hum of the heater and the weight of everything left unsaid. My fingers traced the edges of the thumb drive in my palm, the hard plastic biting into my skin just enough to ground me. We turned onto a tree-lined street where brownstones stood like silent sentinels. The car stopped before one with ivy crawling up its brick facade, its windows glowing warm against the winter night. Daniel didn't speak as he led me up the steps, his keys jingling in the quiet. The foyer smelled of lemon polish and something faintly spicy. Cinnamon, maybe. Guest rooms upstairs to the right, he said, hanging his coat on a wrought iron rack. Bathrooms stocked. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. The normalcy of it all felt surreal. Just hours ago, I'd been sipping champagne at my sister's party, playing my usual role as family afterthought. Now I stood in a stranger's home. My life unraveled at the seams. The guest room was tastefully impersonal, crisp white linens. A writing desk by the window, abstract art on the walls that looked expensive but didn't demand attention. I dropped my clutch on the bed and finally checked my phone. 42 missed calls. 3 voicemails. A string of texts that grew increasingly frantic. The last one from Julia made my breath catch. Asterisk, dad's having chest pains. We're at Lenox Hill. Get here now. Asterisk, my reflection in the dark window showed wide, frightened eyes. Even now, even after everything, the thought of my father in pain sent ice water through my veins. I grabbed my things and was halfway down the stairs when Daniel emerged from the kitchen, a glass of amber liquid in hand. I need to go, I said, voice tight. My father, he was already reaching for his coat. I'll drive you. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Julia paced near the vending machines. Her party dress wrinkled, one heel broken. She looked up when we entered, her face cycling through relief, anger, then cold calculation when she saw who accompanied me. Took you long enough, she snapped, then turned to Daniel. This is a family matter. Daniel didn't flinch. I'll wait, outside. As he left, Julia grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. What were you thinking? Leaving with him. Do you have any idea how that looks? I shook her off. Where's Dad? Stable. They're running tests. Her gaze flickered to the doors Daniel had exited through. You need to be careful with Harrison. He doesn't do anything without a reason. The irony was almost funny. Unlike you and Mom and Dad, who hid my success from me out of the goodness of your hearts. Julia's mouth tightened. You wouldn't have handled it well. You never handle pressure. Well, the familiar words landed like always. But this time something in me rebelled. Funny, the New York Times seemed to think I handled it just fine. A doctor emerged then, cutting off whatever retort Julia had ready. Our mother appeared from another corridor, her makeup smeared, clutching a tissue. The doctor's update was a blur of medical terms. But the gist was clear, stress-induced episode. No permanent damage, but they wanted to keep him overnight. You can see him now, the doctor said. One at a time. Julia went first, of course. Always first. I sat in a plastic chair, picking at a loose thread on my dress while my mother hovered nearby, her perfume cloying in the sterile air. Leela, she began. Her voice, that particular blend of guilt and condescension I knew so well. About tonight, I don't want to do this here. She flinched, but pressed on. Your father was only trying to protect you. The art world is brutal. We saw how you took those early rejections. Stop? The word came out sharper than I intended. Just stop. You don't get to rewrite history. This wasn't protection. This was control. Julia emerged from our father's room then, her eyes red-rimmed. He wants to see you. The hospital room was dim, the monitors beeping a steady rhythm. My father looked smaller in the bed, his usually impeccable hair mustical, the oxygen tubes making him seem suddenly old. "Lila," he said, voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "Come sit." I remained standing. His sigh rattled in his chest. I suppose I deserved that. The monitors continued their steady beeping as he told his version of events. How a gallery owner had contacted him after seeing my work online. How they'd worried I wasn't emotionally ready for the exposure. How they'd set up the pseudonym and the agent as buffers. It was only meant to be temporary, he said, until you built more confidence. The worst part was that part of me understood. The Lila of 2 years ago had been fragile, recovering from a bad breakup and a string of professional rejections. But understanding didn't excuse it. "You took my choices away," I said quietly. "You let Julia mock me for years while you knew Julia has her own struggles." He interrupted, then seemed to regret it. Something in his tone caught my attention. "What does that mean?" He looked away, adjusting his oxygen tube. "Nothing. Sibling rivalry." But the evasion was too telling. There was something else here, another layer to this twisted family dynamic I'd never seen. Before I could press further, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel, * got a call from the Times. "They're running a piece tomorrow about the artist her family tried to hide. Need to talk damage control." * I showed my father the message. His face went ashen. "You need to stop it," he said, struggling to sit up. "That kind of attention will destroy Julia's reputation at the firm." The pieces clicked together with sudden, brutal clarity. This wasn't just about protecting me. It was about protecting Julia, her career, her image as the golden child. I turned toward the door, my chest tight. "Lila," my father called after me, voice uncharacteristically pleading. "Family comes first." I paused with my hand on the doorframe. Maybe it's time I came first for once. The hallway was empty when I stepped out, the fluorescent lights buzzing. Overhead, Daniel waited by the elevators, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, he ended the call. Well, I took a deep breath. "Tell the Times I'll give them an exclusive interview." His eyebrows rose. "Are you sure?" "No." But for the first time in my life, that didn't stop me. Completely. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Julia emerging from our father's room. Her face a mask of fury and something else. Fear, maybe. The same expression she'd worn as a child when I'd accidentally broken her favorite doll, right before she'd pushed me down the stairs. The memory surfaced suddenly, sharp as broken glass. I'd been 6 years old. She'd told our parents I'd fallen. They'd believed her, of course. Just like they'd believed her about everything. Always. The elevator descended. And with it came a terrible, freeing realization. My family's version of me wasn't the truth. It never had been. Daniel's hand brushed mine, startling me from my thoughts. "You okay?" I looked down at our nearly touching fingers, then up at his face. The first person who'd ever really seen me. "I will be," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the city hushed and glittering. Somewhere in the hospital behind us, my family was spinning their narratives, preparing their damage control. But for once, I wasn't waiting around to hear my part in their story. I had my own story to tell. The morning sunlight streaming through Daniel's guest room window felt like an accusation. I'd barely slept, caught between the sickening revelations about my family and the terrifying freedom of having broken free from their narrative. My phone, silenced but not powered off, had continued to buzz intermittently through the night like a persistent insect. I dressed in borrowed clothes, a soft cashmere sweater and jeans. Daniel's housekeeper had left outside my door and padded downstairs, to find the kitchen empty but for a fresh pot of coffee and a note in elegant script. * Had to take an early meeting. Help yourself to anything. We'll talk when I'm back. * The coffee burned my tongue, but I welcomed the pain. It grounded me in this strange new reality where I woke up in a near stranger's home rather than my cramped but familiar apartment, where my family's web of lies had finally been exposed, where my art, my real art, not the safe, pretty things they approved of, had been seen and celebrated without their permission. The thumb drive sat heavy in my pocket. I plugged it into Daniel's laptop password, conveniently written on the same note, and found not just the Kensington Project details but scanned copies of every gallery show featuring my work. Press clippings, even sales records. My hands shook, scrolling through images of my drawings. The ones I'd created in stolen moments between family obligations and part-time jobs, framed and displayed in spaces I'd only dreamed of entering. A sharp knock at the front door startled me. Before I could answer, it swung open to reveal Julia, still in last night's wrinkled dress, her usually perfect hair a tangled mess. She didn't wait for an invitation, storming into the kitchen like she owned the place. "Are you out of your mind?" She slammed a copy of the morning's Times on the counter. My face stared back from the arts section, under the headline, "The Secret Artist, How One Family Tried to Bury a Rising Star." I hadn't given the interview yet. Someone had gone ahead without me. My stomach twisted as I scanned the article. Anonymous sources from the galleries, quotes from critics, even a statement from Daniel's firm confirming my commission. It painted a damning picture of my family, Julia especially. "This will ruin me," Julia hissed. "Do you have any idea how many clients will drop us over this legal community is small, Lila? No one trusts a lawyer from a family that lies like ours." The irony was almost funny. She wasn't here out of concern for me or even our father, only her precious reputation. "Maybe you should have thought of that before mocking me at your party." She grabbed my wrist, her grip painfully tight. "You need to issue a statement. Say it was all a misunderstanding. That we supported your work privately but respected your wish for anonymity." I wrenched free, my coffee cup crashing to the floor. "Why would I do that? So you can go back to being the perfect daughter while I play the struggling artist no one takes seriously." Julia's expression shifted then, the anger giving way to something more complex. "You really don't remember. Do you remember what laughed a bitter, broken sound when we were kids? That drawing you did of Mom, the one that made her cry." A vague memory surfaced me at 8 or 9, sketching our mother at the kitchen table. I'd captured something in her expression, some sadness even I hadn't understood. She'd taken one look at it and burst into tears, locking herself in her room for hours. "Dad told me then," Julia continued, voice low, "your sister sees too much. It's our job to protect her." She met my eyes. "And to protect the rest of us from what she sees." The revelation hit like a physical blow. This wasn't just about controlling me, it was about controlling how the world saw them. My art held up a mirror they couldn't bear to look into. Before I could respond, the front door opened again. Daniel strode in, pausing at the sight of Julia. "I see the vultures are circling early." Julia's mask of vulnerability slipped. "This is your doing. You've been looking for a way to undermine me since I joined the firm." Daniel set his briefcase down with deliberate calm. "Actually, Julia, I promoted you, despite my reservations because your work was excellent. But exploiting your sister, that I won't tolerate." The air between them crackled with unspoken history. Julia looked away first, turning back to me with desperate eyes. "Leela, please. At least come see Dad. He's being discharged this morning." For a moment, the old Lila surfaced, the one who couldn't say no to family, who always smoothed things over. But the new Leela, the one who'd been lied to for years, held firm. "I'll visit when I'm ready, not before." Julia's face hardened. "Fine, but don't come crying to us when Harrison gets what he wants from you and moves on." With that parting shot, she stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames on the walls. Daniel exhaled sharply. "I apologize for that. I should have been here." The protective note in his voice unsettled me. "I can handle my sister." "Of course you can." He moved to the counter, pouring himself coffee despite the broken mug at our feet. "About the Times article, I didn't speak to them." "I know." He met my gaze. "My PR team acted without my approval. They saw the opportunity and took it." The explanation sounded too neat, convenient. His jaw tightened. "I'll have them issue a correction if you want, but the cat's out of the bag now. Your work is getting attention, real attention, not the manufactured kind your family arranged." He was right, and that was the most terrifying part. For the first time in my life, my success or failure would be entirely my own. No safety nets, no hidden benefactors. "I need to see the galleries," I heard myself say. "The ones that showed my work." Daniel nodded as if he'd expected this. "I'll take you today." He hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Your pseudonym, the sales were substantial. There's money held in escrow." Of course there was. Another secret, another layer to the deception. "How much?" "Enough that you'll never need your family's financial support again." The implications sank in slowly. I could leave my crappy apartment, quit the cafe job I'd kept for stability, focus entirely on my art. The freedom was dizzying. Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. "Your father's lawyer just contacted the firm. They're threatening legal action over the rights to your work." A laugh bubbled up, harsh and disbelieving. "On what grounds?" "Claiming your father acted as your agent with your full knowledge and consent." His expression darkened. "It's bullshit, but it could tie things up in court for months." The familiar weight of family obligations settled over me, but this time It felt different. This time, I had options. I had power. Let them try, I said, meeting Daniel's surprised gaze. I have nothing to hide anymore. The realization was as terrifying as it was liberating. All these years, I'd thought my family was protecting me from the world. Turns out, they'd been protecting themselves from me, from my talent, my perspective. My truth, and truth, once set free, has a way of burning through lies like sunlight through fog. The gallery was quieter than I expected, a sleek white space in Chelsea with polished concrete floors that echoed under our footsteps. Daniel had been right. My work looked different here, more alive somehow. The strokes of charcoal and watercolor, vibrating with an energy I hadn't noticed in my cramped studio. Seeing them framed behind glass felt like looking at pieces of my soul displayed for public consumption. These were always my favorites, Daniel said, stopping before a series of sketches I'd done during a particularly bad bout of insomnia. The figures in them were elongated, twisted with anxiety, their faces blurred as if seen through tears. You capture emotion in a way that's almost uncomfortable to look at. A well-dressed woman approached, her heels clicking decisively. Mr. Harrison, we weren't expecting you today. Her gaze flicked to me, then did a double take. Oh, you're her? The way she said it, like I was some mythical creature come to life, made my skin prickle. Before I could respond, Daniel smoothly interjected. Lila, this is Margot Voss, the curator who first discovered your work online. Margot. Lila Carter, though you'd know her as Ilara Moon. Margot's hand was cool and dry when she shook mine. We've been trying to contact you for months through your representative. Her mouth twisted around the word. There's been tremendous interest in your pieces. Several collectors are waiting for your next series. The thought of strangers owning these fragments of my private pain unsettled me. My father arranged all this without telling me, I admitted, watching her reaction closely. I only found out last night. Margot's professionally polished demeanor cracked for just a second, her eyes widening. That explains why you never came. To your own openings, you recovered quickly, gesturing to a back office. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private. The office was cramped but bright, filled with catalogs and shipping manifests. Margot poured us tea from an elaborate ceramic pot while Daniel hovered near the door, giving us space. Your father contacted us 2 years ago. Margot began, handing me a steaming cup. He said you were shy about your talent, that you'd created the Ilara Moon pseudonym to separate your personal life from your art. She sipped her tea, watching me over the rim. We had no reason to doubt him. He provided signed contracts, authentication, everything appeared legitimate. The tea burned my tongue, but I welcomed the distraction. How much did he tell you about me? Very little, which intrigued us actually. Margot opened a drawer, pulling out a thick folder. Your anonymity became part of your mystique. The reclusive artist who channeled raw emotion onto the page. She slid the folder across the desk. Your sales records, as you'll see, your work has been quite lucrative. I flipped through the pages, the numbers swimming before my eyes. 5 figures for single pieces. 6 for entire collections. All this money changing hands, and I'd been living paycheck to paycheck at a coffee shop, thinking the modest deposits in my account were just from online print sales. Daniel cleared his throat. Margot, we need to discuss next steps. Lila's family is claiming they acted as her legal representatives. Margot's lips thinned. Ah, that explains the call from Mr. Carter's attorney this morning. She turned to me. Do you want them representing you? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. This wasn't just about art. It was about who controlled my narrative, my future. No, I said, the word tasting like freedom. I want to handle my own career from now on. Margot nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. Then we'll need to review all existing contracts. And there's the matter of the escrow account. Nearly $300,000 in held proceeds. The number hit me like a physical blow. $300,000. Enough to change everything. Enough to make me truly independent. Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. Julia just gave a statement to page 6. She's claiming Lila has a history of mental instability and that the family was protecting her from exploitation. Margot made a sympathetic noise, but my reaction surprised even me. I laughed. The sound was sharp and humorless. Classic Julia. If she can't control the narrative, she'll destroy it. The gallery's front door chimed, followed by raised voices. A familiar tone cut through the murmur. My mother's clipped. Cultured accent demanding to see the manager. Daniel moved quickly, shutting the office door. Back exit. Margot was already rising, grabbing a set of keys. Through the storage room, I'll handle them. But something in me rebelled at the idea of running again. Always running, always hiding. No, I said, standing. Let them in. My mother froze when she saw me, her carefully curated composure slipping for just a second. She'd dressed down for the occasion, designer jeans, a simple blouse, hard to look casual. Lila, thank God we've been worried sick. Have you? I kept my voice level. Or were you just worried about your reputation? Her gaze flicked to Margot, then Daniel, calculating how much they knew. Can we speak privately, as a family? There's nothing to discuss. I gestured to the sales records still spread across the desk. I know everything now. About the galleries, the money, all the lies. My mother's mask cracked, then, real anger, flashing in her eyes. Lies, we protected you. You have no idea how cruel the world can be to sensitive souls like you. The old wound throbbed. The implication that I was too fragile, too weak to handle reality. But the Leela who'd believed that was gone. Actually, Mom, I think I've handled the cruelty just fine. After all, I survived this family, didn't I? Her hand flew up as if to strike me, stopping just short. The office held its breath. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag and pulled out the thumb drive Daniel had given me, holding it up like a talisman. I'm doing the Kensington project, I said, on my own terms. And if you or Dad or Julia try to interfere, I'll go public with everything. The contracts, the money, how you exploited your own daughter's talent while belittling her for years. My mother's face went frighteningly blank. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats before she turned on her heel and walked out, her retreat as precise as a military maneuver. The gallery door slammed hard enough to rattle the artwork on the walls. Margot let out a low whistle. Well, that was long overdue. Daniel finished. He was looking at me with something like admiration, and for the first time, I didn't shrink. From the attention, Margot cleared her throat. Given the circumstances, perhaps we should accelerate our timeline. There's an opening next week. We could slot you into a proper debut as Leela Carter. No pseudonyms. The thought sent a thrill of terror through me. No more hiding. No more safety nets. Just me and my art, out in the world for everyone to see and judge. I'll do it, I heard myself say. But on one condition, I want all communication to go through me directly. No more intermediaries. Margot smiled, extending her hand. Welcome to the art world, Lila Carter. It's been waiting for you. As we shook, the weight of everything that had happened, the betrayals, the revelations, the sudden, terrifying freedom settled over me. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was a whole new story. And for the first time in my life, I would be the one telling it. The week leading up to my gallery debut passed in a blur of sleepless nights and frenzied creativity. Daniel had offered me his guest room indefinitely, and I'd accepted, knowing my cramped apartment would never accommodate the large canvases I now found myself drawn to. His home became my sanctuary, a space where I could finally create without fear of judgment or interference. The first morning, I woke up there to find sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. I'd panicked briefly before remembering this was my life now. No more hiding, no more pretending. I padded downstairs to find Daniel already at work in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms dusted with dark hair. The domesticity of the scene struck me as oddly intimate. You're up early, he remarked, sliding a plate of eggs and toast across the island. Sleep okay. I hadn't, but not for the usual reasons. My mind had been racing with ideas, possibilities, colors, and shapes demanding to be put to paper. I had an idea for the Kensington project, I said instead of answering, grabbing a napkin, to sketch the rough outline that had haunted me all night. Daniel leaned in, his shoulder brushing mine. His cologne was subtle but intoxicating sandalwood and something spicier underneath. That's brilliant, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Exactly what we need. The words sent an unexpected thrill through me. After years of being the outsider in my own family, having someone, especially someone like Daniel, include me so effortlessly was intoxicating. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings spent sketching over coffee, afternoons lost in a whirlwind of paint and charcoal, evenings reviewing contracts with Margot or fielding interview requests from curious journalists. My father's legal threats had evaporated after Margot's lawyer sent over copies of the forged signatures they'd found on my contracts. A revelation that should have devastated me, but instead just made me numb. It was during one of these marathon painting sessions, my hands smeared with acrylics, that Julia showed up unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing on Daniel's stoop, her usual polished demeanor replaced by something raw and uncertain. "We need to talk," she said, her voice stripped of its usual sharp edges. I hesitated, paintbrush still in hand. The last time we'd spoken, she'd been threatening to expose my supposed mental instability. But the woman before me now looked exhausted. Her designer clothes rumpled, dark circles under her eyes. Daniel appeared behind me, his presence steadying. "I'll be in my office if you need me," he murmured, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before retreating. Julia watched him go, her expression unreadable. "You're sleeping with him?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No. The truth, though the electricity between us was becoming harder to ignore. "Why are you here, Julia?" She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her already disheveled hair. "Dad's been suspended from the firm, pending investigation into the forged contracts." The news should have brought me satisfaction, but all I felt was a dull ache. I didn't report him, I know. She surprised me by sinking onto the front steps, her posture uncharacteristically defeated. It was Harrison. He's been gathering evidence for months. The revelation hit like a punch to the gut. Daniel had been planning this all along. I gripped the doorframe, suddenly unsteady. Julia glanced up at me, her eyes suspiciously bright. "There's more. Mom's left him. She's filing for divorce." The world tilted on its axis. My parents' marriage had always seemed unshakable. The foundation our entire family dynamic was built upon. Because of me. Because of everything, Julia corrected. She looked down at her hands, where she'd been worrying her wedding ring. "Turns out we weren't the perfect family after all." The bitterness in her voice startled me. This wasn't the Julia I knew, the golden child who'd always reveled in her superiority. This was someone just as lost as I was, just as damaged by our family's carefully constructed illusions. I sat beside her on the steps, the concrete cool through my paint-splattered jeans. "Why did you hate me so much?" The question hung between us, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. Julia didn't answer immediately, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I didn't hate you," she said at last. "I envied you." The confession was so unexpected, I actually laughed. "You envious of me? You were perfect. You had everything." Julia shook her head. "I had what they wanted me to have. Did you ever wonder why I never had kids? Why my marriage fell apart?" She met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw the pain she'd always hidden so well. I was too busy being their masterpiece to have a life of my own. The pieces clicked together with sudden, brutal clarity. While I'd chafed under their neglect, Julia had suffocated under their expectations. We'd both been trapped, just in different cages. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. She nodded, wiping hastily at her eyes. "Me too." Standing, she brushed imaginary dust from her skirt, the familiar Julia mask slipping back into place. But it was cracked now, and I could see the real woman underneath. "Your show is tomorrow night. I'd like to come, if that's okay." The olive branch was unexpected, but not unwelcome. "It's a public event. You don't need my permission." Julia smiled then. A small, genuine thing. "Yes, Lila, I do." After she left, I found Daniel in his study, surrounded by files and legal documents. He looked up when I entered, his expression guarded. "You knew?" I accused, my voice trembling. "About my father. About the forgeries. You were investigating him this whole time." Daniel didn't deny it. Setting aside his papers, he stood and crossed to me. "When I first saw your work, I recognized the signature style from some questionable contracts that had crossed my desk. The more I dug, the more I realized what your family had done." His hand hovered near my face, not quite touching. "I wanted to tell you, but I needed proof first. I couldn't risk them covering their tracks. The betrayal should have hurt more, but somehow it didn't. Maybe because everything in my life had been built on lies for so long that this particular deception felt almost inevitable. And my mother leaving. Was that part of your plan too?" Daniel's expression darkened. "No, that was her choice. Apparently being married to a fraud wasn't part of her perfect life plan." I thought of Julia's cracked facade, my father's health scare, my mother's abandonment, the entire family structure collapsing like a house of cards. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt sad. Daniel must have seen something in my expression, because he pulled me into an embrace, his arms warm and solid around me. "You're not like them, Leela, you never were." I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of sandalwood and safety. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be, flaws and all. Tomorrow night would be my debut. As Leela Carter, no pseudonyms, no hiding. The thought terrified me. But as Daniel's lips brushed my forehead, I realized something remarkable. For once in my life, I wasn't afraid of being seen. I was ready. The night of my gallery opening arrived with unseasonably warm air that carried the scent of blooming magnolias through Chelsea's streets. I stood in Margot's back office wearing a simple black dress that felt more like armor than clothing, my fingers nervously tracing the crescent moon pendant at my throat, the same symbol I'd hidden in every piece of art I'd ever created. Outside the door, the murmur of arriving guests vibrated through the walls. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his crisp tuxedo making him look like something out of a dream. He took one look at my shaking hands and crossed a room without a word. Pressing a glass of champagne into my grip, "Drink this," he murmured. "Then breathe." The champagne burned going down, but the warmth steadied me. "What if no one comes?" His lips quirked. Margot had to turn people away. It's standing room. Only a knock interrupted us. Margot peeked in, her usual composure replaced by giddy excitement. "Lila, the Times critic, just arrived. And Vogue's arts editor is asking for you." She hesitated. "Your sister's here too, with your mother." The glass nearly slipped from my fingers. "Together." Margot nodded. "They asked to speak with you." Before things get started, Daniel's hand found the small of my back, grounding me. "You don't have to see them." But I did. Because after tonight, win or lose, I needed to know I'd faced them on my own terms. I found them near a series of my earliest sketches pieces I'd done as a teenager. Back when art was my only escape from Julia's cruelty and my parents' indifference. My mother stood stiffly in a navy Chanel suit, her gaze darting around as if calculating how this event might affect her social standing. Julia looked oddly vulnerable in a simple sheath dress. No jewelry, her fingers clutching. A program like a lifeline. They turned as one when I approached. For a long moment, no one spoke. My mother broke first. "The gallery is lovely," she said, the words clearly costing her. Julia's gaze lingered on a particularly raw sketch one I'd done after she'd told me I'd never amount to anything. "I didn't realize," she began, then stopped. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you." The apology I'd waited a lifetime to hear landed like a punch. All the years of biting my tongue, of shrinking myself to fit their narrative, rose up in a wave that threatened to drown me. "You didn't just hurt me," I said quietly. "You broke me. Over and over. And they let you." I turned to my mother. "You watched it happen and called it sibling rivalry." My mother's carefully constructed mask slipped. "We thought—" "I know what you thought," I interrupted. "That I was too weak, too fragile. But look around." I gestured at the crowded gallery, at the red dots already appearing next to my pieces. "I was never the problem. You were." The truth hung between us, stark and undeniable. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shouting, wasn't pleading for them to understand. I was simply stating facts. Julia surprised me then by reaching out, her fingers brushing mine. "I'd like to try," she whispered, "if you'll let me." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Margot appeared at my elbow. "5 minutes," she murmured. As my mother and Julia drifted away, Daniel materialized beside me, his hand finding mine. "Ready?" The lights dimmed and Margot stepped onto a small platform at the center of the gallery. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present an artist whose work speaks to the hidden truths in all of us, Lila Carter." The applause was deafening. As I stepped forward, the crowd parting before me, I caught glimpses of familiar faces, college professors who'd dismissed my talent, former classmates who'd mocked my dreams, critics who'd ignored my early exhibitions. And there, at the back, my fractured family watching with expressions I couldn't decipher. The speech I'd prepared flew from my mind. Instead, I found myself speaking from some deeper, truer place. 2 months ago, I didn't believe I deserved to be here. I began, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. I'd spent a lifetime being told my art was a hobby, my talent insignificant. But art isn't about permission. It's about truth. And the truth is, I glanced at Daniel, at Julia, at the sea of strangers who'd come to see my work. We're all more than what others decide we're allowed to be. Later, after the last champagne flute had been cleared away and the final red dot placed beside my largest canvas, Daniel and I stood alone in the emptied gallery. The silence was a living thing between us, filled with everything that had gone. Unsaid. He turned to me, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights beyond the windows. "What now?" The question held layers about us, about my family, about the future stretching out before me, wide and unknown. I reached for his hand, twining our fingers together. "Now," I said, we begin. Outside, the first drops of a summer rain began to fall, washing the streets clean, and for the first time in my life, I stepped into the future without looking back.